Means it's a combination of factors. Social media and social networks are one element amongst others. Okay, so it's just a new medium to communicate with a group of people. Okay, so television is still very important. Radio is still very important. Newspapers are still very important. Economics is very important. Word of mouth is very important. But now you also have Facebook and Twitter. So it doesn't replace everything. You know, it's just something in addition to it. Okay, and because of the fact that it's a new form of medium, and it's grassroots and it's immediate, right? That it plays a very specific role. Okay, so I can give some very clear examples. Is that during the uprising in Egypt and during the 18 days, you know, when Mubarak was still in power, there was a police station in a particular neighborhood in Cairo where they were burning their records, right? So someone was there, you know, was connected on Facebook and had lots of followers, and sent out a message saying they're burning the records at this police station. Please help. Within 30 minutes, 500 people were there. Okay. So that wouldn't have been possible, using television, for example, because you would have had to bring, journalists and so on and so forth. Yeah. Okay. In Tunisia, during the uprising as well, they started using social media to spread disinformation. Okay. So they would send out tweets saying we're all planning to go to a certain area to protest against the president. Then all the police and Secret Service would go, and then there would be no one there. Yeah. So it's used in different ways. Okay, and it's also used to communicate to a certain group of people, because not everyone has access to the internet, of course. Okay, and even many people who do have access to the internet aren't connected to social media. So some people do, some people don't, and it's used for specific purposes. Okay, but they're very, very active, and it's remarkable how active they are. It's remarkable how those people who are connected, how they use their networks in a very spontaneous and very dynamic way. In 2011 and 2012, there were many, many incidents where there were fighting taking place against the police. Okay. They would use Twitter and Facebook in order to ask for reinforcements, in order to ask for wood to build field hospitals, in order to ask for medicines. So it's really incredible how organized they are and how they've adapted to this technology in a very, very easy way. But is it only because of this? No. Okay. It's certainly not. No. So the constitutional drafting process was organized in a 6-month period. Okay, that was decided by the military in March 2011. They said that the constitution would be drafted after parliamentary elections. The parliament would nominate 100 members, and those 100 members would draft a constitution in 6 months. Okay, when that process started, it started in June 2012. One of the problems was that very few people in the country, and even outside the country, took it seriously. And the reason why they didn't take it seriously is because the parliament had been dissolved, and the previous attempt to create a 100-member body had also been dissolved by the courts. Okay, so the expectation was that this whole thing is just a disaster. This new 100-member body will be dissolved as well. So there's no real point in taking it seriously. The thing is that it wasn't dissolved. The court decision only came the following year after they finished their work. Okay, we actually only got the court decision a month ago. Okay, so they continued working during that period. Okay, some of the members themselves weren't taking it seriously, but certainly many of the people outside the process weren't taking it seriously. So they continued working. Then Ramadan took place in the middle of the process, right? That really slowed things down. So by the time we reached something like September, October, that's when some people started realizing, well, actually, they may actually reach the end of this process. But at that point, there was only something like 3 months left. So to write a new constitution in that context, right, within a 6-month formal process, but in fact much less, right, because of the circumstances, was always going to be very, very challenging. First of all. Second of all, the negotiation process took place in a very unfortunate way, in my view. Okay, sometimes promises were made and not kept. Okay, sometimes promises were made and kept, but other developments took place within the constitutional process that changed things, right? That changed the meaning of the promise that was made. Okay, and also because of the fact that the political tensions in the country were increasing, the people who were in control of the drafting process, meaning the FJP members or the Islamist members, they were trying to obtain some type of guarantee from the security services that they would stand with them on the day that the referendum took place. Okay, so as a result of that, many concessions were made to the military and to the security services within the drafting of the constitutional process. Okay, within the drafting of the constitution, and as a result of that, the constitution, the new constitution, provides many more guarantees to military independence and military privileges than the previous constitution. A very clear example is that the new constitution clearly establishes the principle that civilians can be tried in military courts. No previous constitution in Egypt had ever said that. Okay, that's just one example. Another example is the Minister of Defense must be an officer. Okay, so it had always been the case that the Minister of Defense was an officer, but it was never in the constitution. So the fact that it wasn't in the constitution meant that someday in the future you could change that, right? You could, just through practice, maybe one day you could nominate a lawyer or a doctor or something like that, as is done in many countries in Europe and elsewhere, right? But now it's in the constitution, so you cannot change it. So the only way to change that practice is by changing the constitution, and that's very difficult. Okay, and these concessions were made, and it caused a lot of people to be very upset, and all these people broke away from the process. And in the end, when all the opposition members withdrew from the process, instead of deciding to take more time to try to rebuild the process and regain the trust and build some type of consensus, in my view, a fundamental mistake was made, and the process was finalized overnight. They started working on the morning of a particular day, and then they finished the following morning. They worked overnight, and just voted on the whole text, and then had a referendum 2 weeks later, and it was over. In my view, that was a fundamental mistake, and that caused the chasm between the two sides to widen even greater. Okay. In terms of what should be done now in order to resolve the constitutional process or the constitutional crisis, in this context, I would think that it would probably be very difficult to restart a new drafting process. That would take a long time, and at this stage, there's a type of exhaustion in the country, for these long processes. I think it's been so mismanaged now that you can't go back and pretend that nothing has happened and start pretending that, we can just have a start from fresh and do what the Tunisians did 2 years ago. The Tunisians, when they started, they were hoping to finish quickly, but it ended up taking more than 2 years now. Okay, and that's helped them a lot. But they started out, on that 2-year process. That was the beginning of their process. Whereas in Egypt, it's always start, stop, start, stop, start, stop, start, stop. And now just to start again and start pretending that nothing has happened, I think people just don't have the appetite for that. So probably, I would say, in this context, the best solution would be to find some type of, relatively limited negotiation process, whereby there would be some type of consensus to change some provisions in the constitution, right? To maintain the general framework, perhaps, but to change some of the elements that people are most upset about, right? But to do it in a consensual way, to have some type of agreement between the parties, okay? Because if you were to replace the constitution, the current one, with a new constitution that's rejected by the Islamists, then it wouldn't be any better. You would be replacing one illegitimate text with another illegitimate text, and that wouldn't help. So it would have to be consensual. I don't think there's an appetite for a new process, right? And I think that there is enough overlap in people's fundamental beliefs to create, to come to an agreement on what the Constitution should say. It just needs to be managed properly. And whether or not, the president or the military or the opposition is capable of that is an open question.